Welcome to the Good Budget Way, where we share real-life stories about everyday people from all walks of life who spend, save, and give to what's truly important in life. I'm your host, Chien. I'm so glad to hear that these stories we've been bringing you have been compelling and relatable. Thank you so much for subscribing and rating this show. This is the 8th episode of 11 on Season 1 of the Good Budget Way. Last time we heard from Brendan, together with his parents Danny and Cindy, who were here to share with us their story of saving for college, applying for college, and deciding how to pay for it when they knew that savings alone wasn't going to be enough. So if you're thinking about saving for a big expense, and definitely if you're thinking about college, go back and give it a listen. I'm totally looking forward to today's episode. We're going to get to hear from Katey, who will be in to share with us how she saved for the big expense of grad school. She'll talk with us about how she saved 8 months worth of paychecks in a 2-year period so that she could spend on what's truly important to her. So we'll hear the nuts and bolts of how she did it, and even more importantly, why she did it the way she did. And at the end, she'll share with us how she feels about this decision. Hey there, thank you so much for joining us today.
Yeah, it's great to be here.
Well, start us off by telling us your name and just a little bit about yourself.
So I'm Katey, and I'm a junior architect, and I'm 3 years out of undergrad and soon to be going back into grad school.
Oh, wow, that's exciting.
It is.
So tell us a little bit about what a junior architect is.
So a junior architect, also known as just designer, if you're familiar with architecture, I just basically am a unlicensed architect in a sense, and so still fairly new and learning all the ropes, and so I'm getting all my hours in and tests in and all that fun stuff.
So there's a lot of stuff, it sounds like, that you need to do before you can be like a true blue architect.
Yes, there's a lot. Yeah.
Okay. And then why do you even care about becoming an architect? Because it sounds like it's not an easy road.
No, it's not the easiest. Like when you meet an architect, most architects will steer you away from architecture. They usually go like, run away.
They're like, I've done this before, don't do it.
Yeah, it's not the most easy field to be in, but I love it. You will only be in it if you love it. I love the people mostly in architecture. I love working with just creating people's homes, offices, just where they spend their days, and how to make their lives better, since so much of our lives revolve around buildings and in buildings. So, yeah.
So what's an example of a building project either that you were part of or that someone else designed that gave you that feeling of like, oh, this is really where people are spending their time and it affects their lives?
I think there's been so many, but the one that was the most impactful was when I spent a year volunteering, working full-time with a nonprofit that designs orphanages, hospitals, all the good stuff for developing countries specifically. And we were doing an orphanage in Guatemala, and it was just seeing all the people like that were putting their heart and soul into this orphanage that wasn't even there yet. They don't even know the kids that were going to be there yet, but just seeing so much devotion from those people and seeing how important it is to be very respectful and intentional in how everything is made and created that we build. That was probably the moment that I really just truly fell in love with architecture and what it can do.
That's incredible. It sounds like the way you describe it, it's not just building buildings, but almost like the building's maybe not even there yet, or definitely doesn't have people in it. It's a quote unquote empty space.
Yes.
But the way that you describe it, like I can hear your imagination of like thinking what it's going to be like when the kids are there, when there are young people as well as the people who care for them in the space, and the way the space is organized so that it can really serve them and let the kids thrive while they're there.
Yeah.
Yeah, it sounds like you're super passionate about it.
Yeah.
So you said earlier you're going to go to grad school. So you're a junior architect, you're putting in your hours, you're taking tests. Why do you need to go to grad school?
So I need to go to grad school to get my accreditation, since I did my undergrad at Berkeley, and they're not an accredited architecture school. And so getting my master's degree will get me accredited, and then I could become a licensed architect.
Okay, so grad school's really expensive.
It is.
And a lot of people go into debt to go to grad school, right? And so before actually we get into your main story about telling us how you're thinking about paying for grad school, since you're going to be starting, take us back to college. Yeah. How did you pay for college?
So how I pay for college is largely due to a good amount of scholarships and a good amount of government grants. And there's this woman in my high school who basically, like, her goal and like for her entire job was to get any of the kids that are interested in college into college. And that entails like being able to pay for it as well. And so she was incredibly helpful in that. And she made it super easy for me to apply to a bunch of scholarships. And she also curated lots of scholarships through donors and such. And so she was just all about that. And I got almost, I want to say, like $13,000 or so from that experience.
That's incredible.
Yeah, it was. She was amazing.
Yeah, every school should have one of those
I know,
kinds
right?
of counselors.
Yeah.
So the school that you went to, was it the kind of place that like everybody would go to college and everyone kind of knew how they were going to pay for it?
No, my school. Not many of the students at my high school actually went to college afterwards. It was a very, I want to call it like urban high school, like your, classic urban public LA high school. And it had a lot of people. I think there was about 3,000 total students that went to it. So it was a large school, and not many of them went on to college.
So you had some financial aid money, you had some scholarship money, and then you went to college. And was that enough to just pay for everything?
It was enough to cover my tuition and some book expenses and supply expenses because of my major. But a lot of the living costs I actually covered with my part-time job.
Oh, I see.
So, yeah.
So you got a part-time job. It sounds like did you take loans? Because a lot of people take loans for college.
I actually didn't take loans. Yeah.
So how did you pull that off? How did you go to college without loans? Because you went to college pretty recently.
Yes.
So it was not like back in the day when college was super, super affordable.
Yes. To be honest, a lot of the grants I got from the government, because of my family's income level, we qualified for quite a bit of them. And so they covered almost my full tuition because of that. And so I basically only had to cover living expenses to get through college. So, yeah, that was very helpful.
Yeah. And you said you had a part-time job. So how did you balance work and school?
Well, I just barely skimmed by, let's just say I didn't get like A's in any of my classes.
Yeah.
But the job I had was phenomenal. I was able to do homework while I was at work. I basically was sitting at a front desk for a majority of the time, and I was like the IT help person kind of person. And so I just kind of sat there, and my bosses were super chill, didn't really care what we did as long as we did our job when it came to happen. And so I got to actually do some of my homework there, and yeah.
You came away from college without loans, so without debt. How did that feel to you?
Oh, it was amazing. It kind of gave me this freedom and confidence to be able to go. I mentioned that I worked as a kind of volunteer full-time person at this nonprofit, and I was able to do that because I felt like, I don't have any other expenses tying me down. I only need to raise this much money to live in this area and cover my food expenses and my flight costs, and that's what I need to do. And it helped me, significantly in that area.
You said it felt like freedom. What did it feel like you were free from?
Just not having to pay this one set of fee, kind of like almost like having like a rent fee, essentially. I didn't have this extra expense that I needed to worry about, and I didn't need to worry about having that money for that expense.
I see. So if you kind of knew you had the school loan that you had to pay off every month, that would have felt like more of a weight, and it would have you might not have been able to make the same choices as you did.
Yeah, or even raise the amount of money that I needed, to be honest.
So let's get into that. How are you going to make it work to pay for grad school?
I basically, so I knew when I came out of working for the nonprofit, I knew that I was going to go back to grad school. And I knew that I was going to do that in 2 years. So I had like a strict kind of like timeline in a sense. And so I knew that I wanted to put almost like a third of my income away each month.
That's a substantial part of your income.
It is.
Yeah. Like that's like about as much as a lot of people spend on housing every month.
Yeah.
Like rent or mortgge, a third of it goes there.
Yeah. I kind of wanted to do the same, like almost the same as like my rent. I kind of wanted to do that. And I had just come back off of living on almost nothing on that nonprofit. Like I was scraping the bottom of the barrel there. And so I'm like, okay, like if I know how to, also just my upbringing, I know how to live very like cheaply. And I don't mind it is another thing. And so, yeah, I just did that, putting a third of my income away each month until I got to, I guess now.
That's so interesting because the way you're talking about it is like a skill set, right?
It is. It really is.
Yeah. It's like knowing how to live on a small amount of money for like daily living expenses, food, fun, transportation, that kind of thing. Versus kind of saying like, oh, like I finally got a job that's like pays, you know, a decent amount. And then now I'm going to like blow the whole wad. Which is fine, right? Like if that's what you choose to do.
Yeah.
But in your case, the thing that you cared more about is saving up for grad school.
Yeah.
So then to carve out a third of your income every month to set aside for grad school over this 2-year timeline you gave yourself. We talk about the Good Budget way, save for big expenses, and that is part of what it means to budget with a why, or to like have purpose, right? Yeah. So in your particular situation, the big expense that you're saving for is grad school, and you have this really deep set of reasons why it's close to your heart, that you're willing to put aside a third of your income of that every month for 2 years, so that you can spend it in a fairly short amount of time going to grad school.
Yeah.
So you saved up a third of your income over 24 months, which is basically 8 months worth of income.
Yeah.
Like 8 months worth of paychecks.
Yes.
That's amazing. Is that going to be enough to pay for grad school?
No.
Okay, that's crazy because it's 8 months worth of paychecks.
Yeah.
So where do you think the other money's going to come from?
So the other money is basically going to be coming from, again, either loans or part-time jobs or scholarships. So, yeah, the amount of money that I saved up, that chunk, is going to be basically the first thing that I like kind of spend, and then I'm basically going to be like rolling from there. Like, okay, what do I need to fill in the gaps? So that's basically my approach right now. Yeah.
And it sounds like you have experience with figuring out chasing scholarships as well as a part-time job that you can do that works well with school.
Yeah.
Because obviously not all part-time jobs work well with school.
No.
Yeah. So I'm still thinking about that 8 months worth of paychecks that you saved up. Was there ever a time when saving was hard?
Oh, yeah.
You mean you didn't just do it in your sleep?
No. Yeah, it was mainly when I started dating my now fiance, and his family at the time lived in another country. Okay. And so going to see them wasn't just like let me just, because all my family lives in LA. So I was like, oh yeah, just drive down to LA or buy like $100 ticket or something, like something like not terribly expensive. But his was like, oh, I have to pay like $1,500 and like a flight fare and like, like stuff like that. It's like, all right. So it wasn't the cheapest visit, I would say, to them.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
$1,500 for a plane ticket. But I mean, that's one of those other things of like spend on what's important, right? If your relationship with him is really important, and then it sounds like developed to the point where you're engaged, it's worth that. Yeah. Right.
Yeah.
But then what did you do about your savings plan? Because $1,500 is a lot of money.
Yeah. Basically, I went with, there was some months that I actually like oversaved.
Oh.
So I had
Go
more.
you.
I know, yeah. And then there's obviously some months where I undersaved. And if I knew that there was going to be this huge expense, say like $1,500 for a flight fare, I work hourly.
Okay.
I'm a contract worker. And so I would just ask my boss, like, can I get some more hours? Or like, I'm just going to work a little later. And that kind of helped supplement some of the like total depletion of that. And so, yeah, and it was basically looking at like, okay, how much money did I spend this month? Oh, it was a little too much. Okay, next month I'm going to remind myself to cut back a bit. And maybe not go on a shopping spree or something, or like not buy that coffee that I would want to during break or something. So, yeah.
Yeah, so it sounds like the way that you adapted along the way was that you played with both the income side by asking for more hours so that then you'd have a larger paycheck on that particular month, and on the expense side by thinking about like, how can I cut back on spending or hold off on things that I don't necessarily really need right now. Yeah. And then that was the way that you made up for your savings targets.
Yeah.
For 1/3 of your income every month. I'm still so like impressed by that. So how do you feel about taking on debt, the possibility of taking on debt? Because you're going into grad school, and a lot of people take on debt for that.
Yeah, I'm not against it. I've like come to the terms that I probably will have to, but I would prefer not to be in as much debt as I like typically would be if I didn't save or, apply to certain scholarships or something like that.
Okay, so it sounds like for you, avoiding debt means that there's more money that's flexible. It could be used for saving. And what else do you imagine yourself using that other money for? So
I still do some volunteer work with the nonprofit that I used to work full time with. And I try to do like one trip with them a year. At least that's what I would like to. But depending on, again, expenses. And that's something that I really feel passionate about and really would like to do more in the future. And so that's something that I would much rather put all that extra money that loans would probably take away.
I see. So it sounds like for you then there's this picture of, well, we talk about on the Good Budget Way, give money and more. And it sounds like you're talking about giving money to pay for the expenses for you to go on these trips, as well as your time, which I would say is kind of the more, right? It's not just literally writing a check, giving cash over, but you're actually giving your time and your own skills and your passions to this nonprofit and these causes and really people that you care about serving.
Yeah.
That's really cool. So when you think about grad school and trying not to take on loans for grad school, tell us about anyone that you've talked to who did take on loans for grad school.
So I only know like a couple people, or at least that I'm aware of. But the one person that I've probably talked to the most about grad school loans is probably my former boss, Jack. And he took... He always says like, oh, I took on maybe a little too much loans. But one of the main reasons that he was able to pay for all that was he also is in a bracket of people that has a higher income, mainly because of his wife's job.
Okay.
And his wife's family. And so, yeah, they've done very well for themselves and own quite a few properties now. So they've had a kind of fallback that is much stronger than mine is at the moment.
So it sounds like for him, he took out a lot of loans. And in his own words, he would probably say maybe a little too much. But he had some kind of circumstances or resources to fall back on in his wife's income, as well as... also family to potentially fall back on. But you said that's different than your situation. So how would you describe your situation? What's your fallback plan? or a lack thereof?
So I'm actually engaged right now.
Congratulations.
Thanks. And so my fiance, I know that he's not going to be making anything more substantial than he is right now. And so it's not... it's not a lot, and especially since he's also a full-time student as well. Okay. And so he's not making a lot. I'm not going to be making a lot since architects, that's just not in, architects just don't make that much money, relatively speaking. And then also I think I mentioned a little bit before about how my family, our income level is a little bit on the lower side. And knowing that it's like, okay, well, my parents aren't going to be able to give me like $50,000 loan or something for a house or something. They're not going to be able to kind of do that, or they're not going to be able to help me pay for a grad school or undergrad. And, just knowing that, like, okay, like if that's not going to be an option, well, then those aren't there, then what can I do to make sure that I have a kind of fallback plan to lean on if something goes terribly wrong.
Yeah, that makes sense. I feel like it's interesting because you had, it sounds like, a fair amount of conversations with Jack to understand how he paid for grad school, the situation he was in, the circumstances that kind of served as a fallback plan for him. If things didn't go well, like if he then graduated from grad school in a bad market and wasn't able to get a job soon after, he had some kind of support system around him. And I really appreciate your response to that, because you're basically saying, like, okay, I understand your situation and I understand mine, and I know that mine's different. And instead of kind of saying like, oh, I wish I had your situation, like, why are my circumstances not like yours? Your response is really practical. Like, okay, so what am I going to do? Because I care about becoming an architect. I'm passionate about making buildings that create spaces that serve people's everyday lives. And so how am I going to do that given the circumstances that I have right now? Yeah, that's great.
Thank you.
It is. I feel like sometimes when we talk about money and budgeting, it is, it's normal to feel like, oh, if my situation were just a little bit different, if it were just a little bit more like someone else, then I could make this work. But you're saying, well, this is the situation I have, and so I'm going to figure out a way to make it work. Yeah. Okay, so it sounds like, from what you're describing, that you're like a superstar with money.
I wouldn't say that.
No? How would you describe your relationship with money?
So me and my fiance are taking like this premarital counseling sort of stuff right now. And so we got to like these personality tests that we take to see, our personalities, if we didn't know them already. And so we took the test, and like I got like bubbly social person as one of the categories.
I can tell.
and the list all like, these are like good things about the person, and then these are bad things. And like some of the bad things was like, do not let this person handle money.
Wait, and that was about you?
That was about me.
Nice.
Because I'm an incredibly spacey person. I forget so many things, and yeah, it's pretty bad. It's pretty bad.
That's really interesting, because like on the one hand you're saying you're spacey, and like this personality test told to the two of you not to let you handle money. But then on the other hand, it does seem like, even if you might not call it like money management or like budgeting, what you have, the system that you have, is essentially like a really streamlined budget.
Yeah.
Right. You've basically broken up your expenses into 3 chunks, or your income into 3 chunks. 1/3 goes to savings for grad school. 1/3 goes to rent. Is that right?
Yes.
And then 1/3 goes to everything else. So it is actually a budget. But it's one that works for you.
Yeah.
Right. It's not the kind of like, you don't have the personality type where you'd have like, 50,000 different categories or envelopes that you would say like really fine, like, okay, this one's for coffee and then this one's for clothes that I buy on Saturdays or whatever, right? You just have the 3 buckets. But it works for you.
Yes.
So that's where I feel like, I would say that you figured out a way to manage money that works for you. And I would call it a budget. Even if other people might be like, oh, that's like
it's like half a budget. It's like
but it's just a really streamlined one. And it's worked, and it's helped you achieve your goal of saving those 8 months worth of paychecks for grad school.
Yeah.
Well, that's great. So you've made a lot of choices on this journey to saving up to pay for grad school. Some of them were things that you chose to hold back on. Other things were things that you chose to prioritize, like the plane tickets to visit your fiance. How do you feel about all those choices at this point?
I feel good about them, especially now that we're planning a wedding. It's nice to also just have some sort of buffer a bit to know, like, oh, if everything goes awry, there's something there. And I also deferred for a year my grad school.
Oh, so you got in. Congratulations.
So I got in, yeah.
and then you're not going to go this year. You're going to wait one more year.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. And that's mainly to try and get that in-state tuition, So I'll be living in the state for a year before going into grad school, which I highly recommend.
Brings down the tuition bill.
Yeah.
Which also means that it's less likely that you'll need to take as much loans.
Yes. Yeah. And so, it also just makes the transition into a new city much easier.
Yeah.
And
you don't have the move and start school and get married all in one go.
In one thing,
Yeah.
Yeah. So it kind of eases you into it a bit more.
Yeah.
And so also knowing that it's okay, well, now I have a full extra year that I wasn't planning on. And so knowing that's kind of is like a nice breather, okay, I saved up the amount of money that I wanted to. And now I could maybe dip into that if we need extra money for our wedding or something, or we need say if we wanted to give some nice gifts to our family for thanking them for all their heavy lifting that they'll be doing
at your wedding.
Yeah.
Have you asked them yet for all
the help? Yeah. So doing that is being very is helpful, and also knowing that I was able to do all the things I wanted to, and also just feeling like my money was going to the things that I wanted it to go to. My big goal, my dreams are I'll marry this guy and see his family and go to grad school. So all the things that I would love to do in my life. And knowing that my money went towards that and not towards a new shirt or something, or maybe a fancier apartment or a fancier car even. And those aren't my dreams and things that I want in my life as much as I want the grad school and my fiance.
I love the way you described that. I feel like you painted a picture of what it means when we say budget with a Y, is to put money towards the things that you really wanted to go to, the dreams that are yours.
Yeah.
Right. And for you, that's your relationship, that's soon becoming a marriage, as well as grad school. And for some other people, it may be the nicer apartment or the nicer car, because that connects with something deep in them, right?
Yeah.
Where that is connected with their dreams and kind of what their why is, what their vision is. In your case, you've been really clear about, okay, this is what I really care about. And so I'm organizing money and budget around that so that I can continue to build this relationship. We're going to get married and keep moving towards grad school and becoming an architect, which is kind of sounds like for you not just a career path, but a way to serve people and design spaces that people can really thrive and grow in.
Yeah.
That's really great. Well, I've really enjoyed talking with you, Katey. Thank you so much for coming in.
No problem.
Katey is such a hoot. I am so glad we got to hear from her. The thing that struck me the most out of her story is how much she lives out what we mean when we say budget with a Y. For her, she's totally clear on what's truly important to her and is willing to spend on it. And for her, that's 1, grad school, which we heard a lot about, and 2, her relationship and soon-to-be marriage. And the way that she's able to spend on what's truly important is that she's clear about what's enough. She decides what's enough. In her words, she talked about knowing how to live cheaply based on her upbringing, and she really uses that as a skill. So then, because she knows what's enough, she's able to split up her income into this 1/3, 1/3, 1/3, where 1/3 is for housing or rent, 1/3 is for saving for grad school, the big expense, and 1/3 is for everything else. And that kind of all adds up to her being able to save for the big expense of grad school, so much so that she saved 8 months worth of paychecks in 2 years. That is super impressive and it's really fun to see and hear. The other thing that struck me out of her story is how she adapted along the way. It wasn't like saving all this money was easy all the time. There were places where she ran into unexpected expenses as she began to date the person who's now her fiancé and needed to spend money to fly to see him. But that she didn't let that set her back. She stuck with it and was still able to stay on track with her savings goals. For me, I'm super inspired to reconsider, okay, I'm just talked to someone who saved 8 months worth of paychecks in 2 years. Is it possible for our family to save more for college for our kids than we have been doing? And if so, how do we arrange other things in our budgets to make that possible? Or on the flip side, if it's not truly that important to save more than we have been, then to just let it go and focus on the things that are truly important. Next time, we'll get to hear from Chiming and Juliet, who will be here to share their story of how they sold their house and then bought a new one, which could sound like kind of a normal story, but their story is unique. It's got so many different twists and turns, involves a lot of different families, not just their own. So definitely tune in next time to hear from them. Thanks for listening to The Good Budget Way, everyone. If you're enjoying this podcast, please do subscribe for more and rate it to help other folks find it too. And let us know what you thought of Katey's story on our website at goodbudget.com/podcast. And if she inspired you to budget with a Y, head on over to goodbudget.com to get started with our simple budget tools. Or go straight to the App Store or Google Play and get the Good Budget app. Happy budgeting!